The echoes of Blackwood. The trailhead marker was a splintered piece of cedar, leaning at a desolate 30-degree angle. Etched into its weathered face were the words, Blackwood Forest. Danger. Unmaintained area. Danger. Unmaintained area. Liam read aloud, adjusting the enormous pack on his shoulders, his tone thick with deliberate irony. The perfect slogan for a weekend escape. Mark, the self-appointed comic relief, finished tightening his bootlaces and looked up at the dense curtain of pine and birch. The woods were unnervingly still. They had driven 4 hours east of the city, chasing the kind of solitude that felt less refreshing and more oppressive the moment they stepped out of the car. "You didn't tell us it was called Blackwood, Liam," Mark said, trying for a joke but failing when the words fell flat into the profound silence. "Sounds like a cheap horror sequel." Sarah didn't laugh. She was already several steps into the tree line, her hand hovering near the small silver locket she always wore when she felt uneasy. "It's just a name, guys. It's remote. That's the point," Liam insisted, wiping a bead of sweat from his forehead. "The map says the lake, Whispering Pond, is only 3 miles in. We'll be set up by sundown." They began their trek. For the first hour, the air was heavy with the scent of pine needles and damp earth. The ground was cushioned by decades of fallen leaves, making their footsteps oddly silent. This was the first anomaly. The sound. In any healthy forest, there is a constant, low thrum of life. The rustle of small animals, the incessant chirping of insects, the distant call of a hawk. Here, there was nothing. It was not merely quiet. It was a profound, almost hostile absence of sound. The silence pressed in on them, making the normal sounds of their movement, the squeak of Liam's backpack strap, the rasp of Mark's breath, sound impossibly loud, alien even. "The bugs must be on vacation," Mark muttered finally, breaking a long spell of silence. "Maybe it's too high up," Sarah suggested, though she knew better. They weren't high enough for that. She stopped and tilted her head back, gazing up through the high canopy. The sunlight filtered down in sickly, greenish-yellow shafts. "It's like the forest is holding its breath." Liam, ever the pragmatist, offered the scientific explanation. High humidity, strange wind patterns, maybe a low-frequency hum that drove the wildlife away. But even he couldn't shake the feeling of being actively observed by the surrounding stillness. They found the pond just as the sun began to dip, painting the sky in violent shades of orange and bruised purple. It wasn't whispering. It was motionless. The surface of the water was a perfect, reflective mirror, bordered by tall, dead reeds. They pitched their tents 20 yards from the shore on a small patch of relatively flat, dry ground. It was a familiar routine, yet tonight, the familiar motions felt clumsy and rushed. Liam started the fire. He was good at it, stacking the kindling expertly, nursing the flame until the dry wood caught and roared into life. As the flames grew, throwing dancing shadows against the pines, the oppressive silence seemed to retreat slightly, pushed back by the crackle and pop of the burning wood. They ate canned chili and drank cheap beer. The conversation was strained at first, filled with small talk, but as the fire established itself, they gradually relaxed. "Okay, Liam, your turn," Mark said, gesturing with his beer bottle. "Why this spot, really? You said it was remote, but you've camped everywhere. What's the real story?" Liam hesitated, staring into the flames. "I found an old forum online. A hiking group. They talked about this area, Blackwood. They said the pond itself was weirdly isolated. They claimed it was off limits because of a history with a logging company decades ago, but never finished the story. Just vague references to bad luck and things that shouldn't be here." Sarah shivered, pulling her fleece jacket tighter. "That's comforting. You brought us to a place called Blackwood with a history of bad luck. Relax, Sarah. It's probably just a swamp gas legend, Liam said, trying to sound dismissive. But then he added, lowering his voice, one guy on the forum, an old local, mentioned something disturbing. He said the forest had a way of wearing down your edges. He claimed that when you talked, the air swallowed your voice, but sometimes, when you listened hard enough, the forest would give it back. Mark raised an eyebrow. Like an echo. No, Liam corrected, shaking his head. He said a normal echo repeats what you said right after. But this forest, it waits. It repeats things you said days ago. Or things you thought. The fire crackled, spitting embers into the darkness. The silence beyond the firelight seemed to lean in again, attentive. Let's just stick to the chili and beer, all right? Mark suggested, his eyes darting towards the black wall of the trees. The rest of the evening passed without incident. They spoke mostly in low tones, instinctively afraid of shouting into the void. By 11, the fire had dwindled to glowing coals. I'm hitting the sack, Mark announced, standing up quickly. I need 12 hours of sleep to recover from that horror movie pitch, Liam. He zipped himself into his two-person dome tent. Liam and Sarah lingered, watching the last embers. Do you think we should have listened to the old guy? Sarah whispered. Liam wrapped an arm around her, kissing her hair. We're fine. It's just old land. It sounds creepy because we made it sound creepy. Good night. They separated, zipping themselves into their own tent. As Liam drifted toward sleep, the last thing he heard was the distant, faint thump of Mark settling into his sleeping bag, and the overwhelming, waiting quiet of Blackwood Forest. Liam woke up sometime after midnight. Not with a start, but with a creeping awareness that something was wrong. His heart was pounding, and his mouth was dry. He reached out and felt Sarah's even breathing beside him. She was asleep, curled into a ball. He lay still, trying to identify the source of his anxiety. Silence. But it was different now. The absence of natural sound was still there, but now it was punctured by a single, rhythmic noise. Thump, pause, thump, pause, thump. It was coming from the direction of Mark's tent, about 20 yards away, near the pond. It sounded exactly like someone deliberately, rhythmically thumping their fist, or maybe the sole of a boot, against the dry earth. Liam sat up slowly, easing the zipper down a bare inch and peering out. The moon was a sliver, but the air held a faint, pale luminescence. He could just make out the silhouette of Mark's tent. The thumping stopped. Liam held his breath for a full minute. Nothing. He was about to write it off as an uneasy dream when a new sound started. It was Mark's voice. No, man. No. I need the flashlight. Where did you put the flashlight? I can't see anything. The voice was pitched too low, strained, and slightly muffled, as if Mark was whispering into his sleeping bag. Liam unzipped the tent fully and stepped out, pulling on a sweatshirt. He walked quietly across the damp ground toward Mark's tent. Mark, everything all right? Liam whispered. Silence. Then, the voice came again, clear as a bell, but sounding strangely flat, like a recording played without emotion. Yeah, I'm fine. Just looking for the flashlight. Go back to sleep. The flashlight is in your backpack, next to your head. I saw you put it there, Liam said, annoyed. Mark often did this, pretended to be lost or confused in the dark. Stop messing around. Go back to sleep, Liam. Seriously. I'm fine. The dismissal was too quick, too absolute. But Liam was tired, and Mark sounded genuinely irritated, perhaps embarrassed at having woken him. Fine, Liam muttered, turning back to his tent. If you wake up Sarah, I swear. He got back into his sleeping bag, zipped up, and forced himself to close his eyes. He heard a soft sound from Mark's tent, almost a sigh, followed by a light thunk, the sound of something small hitting the tent floor. Then, nothing. The deep quiet returned. Liam checked his watch. It was 3:17 a.m. He didn't wake up again until the first gray light of dawn began to permeate the tent fabric. Liam was the first to emerge. The air was cold, damp, and smelled strongly of pine sap and the extinguished bonfire. He checked his phone. No service, as expected. He walked over to where the fire pit was, kicking the ashes to ensure they were cold. He glanced at Mark's tent. It was sealed. Mark is a champion sleeper, Liam thought, smiling faintly. He went to the car to retrieve the breakfast provisions, which they had wisely locked away to deter any curious local wildlife. When he returned, Sarah was stirring inside their tent. Mark's tent, however, was exactly as he'd left it, sealed, silent, and motionless. Liam walked over and tapped the side gently. "Mark. Breakfast is ready. We've got coffee. Get up." No response. Liam tapped harder. "Come on, slacker. I heard you banging around at 3 in the morning. Time to pay the piper." Still nothing. Liam reached for the main zipper. He yanked it down. Mark's tent was empty. The 2 sleeping bags were neatly unrolled and partially unzipped, resting on the inflatable mattress. His backpack sat upright by the entrance. His boots were set side by side. But Mark was gone. Liam stood there, paralyzed, the chill of the morning suddenly penetrating his bones. This wasn't a prank. Mark might wander off to pee, but he would never leave his tent open or leave his phone and jacket behind. Mark's phone was on the mattress, resting on a crushed candy bar wrapper. His favorite bright red fleece, which he wore every single morning, was draped over the back of the backpack. "Liam, what's wrong?" Sarah's voice was sharp with instant alarm. She had emerged from their tent, rubbing sleep from her eyes. Liam didn't answer. He just pointed a trembling finger at the empty tent. Sarah walked over, her face pale. She stepped inside, her eyes scanning the space. "Did he go for a walk? A pee break?" "His jacket's here," Liam said, his voice husky. "He never goes anywhere without that stupid red jacket. And his boots are here." He pointed to the heavy leather boots, which Mark had definitely been wearing yesterday. On the ground next to the boots, Liam saw a single, deep, clean indentation in the dirt, like the heavy, rhythmic thump he had heard earlier. "Check his pack," Liam ordered. Sarah pulled out the contents. Flashlight, water filter, compass, a few snacks, a paperback novel. "Wait," Sarah said, holding up a small, rectangular wooden frame. It was a cheap, unfinished pine frame, about 5 by 7 inches, with a blank piece of cardboard backing. "What is this?" Mark doesn't carry frames. Liam recognized it instantly. "That's mine. From my childhood bedroom. It had a photo of me and my dog. It was sitting on my bedside table at home." Sarah's eyes widened in horror. "You mean, he brought it from your house?" "No," Liam whispered, his mind racing, trying to connect the sound, the voice, the missing man. "We left 4 days ago. I haven't been near that table. It was definitely there when we left." He suddenly remembered the flat, emotionless voice in the night. "No, man. No. I need the flashlight." "Where did you put the flashlight?" "I can't see anything." Liam's blood ran cold. The voice hadn't sounded like Mark looking for a flashlight. It sounded like Mark reciting a line of dialogue, devoid of context or panic. And the next line. "Go back to sleep, Liam. Seriously. I'm fine." Liam's heart slammed against his ribs. That was exactly what he had said to Mark a week prior, when Mark was stressing about a work deadline and called him late at night. Liam had been half asleep and had given that exact, irritable dismissal. The forest hadn't echoed what Mark said. It had echoed Liam's own voice from days earlier, delivered through Mark's throat. The thumping returned to him. Thump. Pause. Thump. ... It sounded like a desperate attempt to get attention, muffled by the ground. He didn't just walk away. Sarah, Liam said, his voice barely a breath. Something lured him out. Something that sounds exactly like us. Panic was an icy, paralyzing hand. They spent the next 2 hours in a frantic, disorganized search, circling the camp, calling Mark's name. Mark, if this is a joke, it's not funny. Answer us. Liam shouted, his voice immediately muffled by the forest, swallowed by the deep quiet. Sarah found the first undeniable sign of struggle near the edge of the pond. A long, shallow tear in the soft mud, as if something heavy had been dragged. It led directly to the motionless, black water. Liam checked the ground near the tear. There was a faint scent. Not blood, but something musky and damp, like old, wet soil disturbed after decades. He also saw 3 small, perfectly round, unnaturally deep depressions in the mud, arranged in an almost triangular pattern. They were too large to be deer, too small and symmetrical to be a bear. We have to get out, Sarah said, her voice shaking violently. Now. We have to leave everything and run. Liam nodded, his skepticism completely annihilated, replaced by primal terror. Grab the keys, the water filter, and the radio. Everything else stays. As they rushed back to break down their own tent, a sound stopped them dead. It was a laugh. Sarah's laugh. A light, airy, genuine laugh, the sound she made when completely unburdened. It came from the forest, perhaps only 50 yards away. Oh, that's so typical, Mark. You have to get a picture of that, right? The voice, Sarah's voice, called out. Liam looked at the real Sarah, who was standing beside him, her face slack with terror. I didn't say that, she whispered. I didn't say anything. The other. Sarah's voice repeated the phrase, slightly louder this time, perfectly inflection for inflection. Oh, that's so typical, Mark. You have to get a picture of that, right? Then, a new sound. Mark's voice, but not strained or flat. This sound was close to the real Mark, playful and slightly exasperated. Seriously, we just found a perfect spot, and you're complaining about the angle. Mark's voice said, seemingly arguing with Sarah about something trivial. The exchange was a perfect, insidious trap. It used a memory of a casual argument they'd had on a previous trip, blending the real voices with the context of a mundane, ongoing conversation. It was designed to make them doubt their senses, to convince them their friend and Sarah were just having a casual argument deeper in the trees. They're over there, Liam said, his hand gripping Sarah's arm so tightly it hurt. Whatever it is, it has Mark. And it's using his voice to keep us separated and confused. Wait, Sarah whimpered, tears starting to track down her cheeks. I remember that conversation. We were hiking last summer in the Rockies. How could it know that? It heard us talking about it yesterday. Liam hissed. No, wait, it heard us thinking about it. That old man said it gives back things you thought. It's digging into our memories. The mimicry called out again, this time with a note of distress in Sarah's voice. Liam. Liam. I think Mark hurt his ankle. We need help over here. Hurry. Liam instinctively took a step toward the sound. Sarah grabbed his shirt. No. Liam. Don't. My real voice is right here. That's not me. It's trying to split us up. Liam stopped, chest heaving, sweat cold on his neck. The temptation to believe the sound, to run to the distressed voice of the woman he loved, was almost overwhelming. The forest was silent again, waiting to see if the bait was taken. "We need the radio," Liam gasped, pulling Sarah toward the car. "We have to get a signal and get help." They scrambled to the car, fumbling with the keys. The panic made their hands useless. Liam finally managed to unlock the trunk. He grabbed the emergency satellite radio. As he did, a new sound came, directly behind them, closer than ever. It was deep, guttural, and unmistakable. The sound of Mark vomiting, followed by a raw, painful, rattling cough that ended in a sickening crack, the sound of breaking bone. Sarah screamed, a genuine, piercing sound of pure terror. She lunged into the car, slamming the door shut. Liam jumped into the driver's seat. He turned the key. Nothing. He tried again, turning the ignition. The engine groaned once, a weak, pathetic sound, and died. "No, no, no," Liam chanted, trying to pump the gas. The sound returned, directly outside Liam's window, followed by a light tap on the glass. The voice was Mark's. It was soft, pleading, and horribly intimate. Liam. It's okay. Just a bad cough. Sarah. Don't leave me. Remember the lighthouse. We promised to go back. Don't leave me, please." Liam gripped the steering wheel so hard his knuckles turned white. The lighthouse. That was a private memory, something he and Mark discussed only once, years ago. "It's not him," Sarah sobbed, her hands clamped over her ears. "It's not him, Liam. Drive." Liam looked over. Through the faint reflection of the window glass, he saw the faint outline of a figure standing there. It was tall, too tall, and unnaturally slender. But the shape was mostly obscured by the blackness clinging to it, like a shroud of deep shadow. He closed his eyes and tried the key one more time. The engine caught, sputtering, then roared to life. Liam slammed the car into reverse and spun the wheel, sending the vehicle tearing backward over the flattened grass. He hit the brakes, yanked the shifter into drive, and floored the accelerator. The car shot forward, leaving the campground behind. They drove maniacally for what felt like 10 minutes, hitting potholes that jarred their teeth. Liam finally eased his foot off the gas as they reached the main trail, which was barely wide enough for the car. He glanced in the rear view mirror. Nothing. The black woods had swallowed everything. "We have to call the police," Sarah said, her voice still shaking, but gaining a brittle firmness. Liam stopped the car, killed the engine, and grabbed the sat radio. He extended the antenna and tried to follow the complex instructions for connection. As he worked, Sarah looked out the window. "Liam, look." He followed her gaze. They were parked directly beside a small, almost invisible path that branched off the main trail. It was little more than 2 overgrown tire tracks leading into the thicker woods. Resting on a downed log beside the path was the small wooden picture frame. The one that belonged on Liam's bedside table. They stared at it, frozen. It hadn't been there when they drove in yesterday. "It's bait," Liam whispered. "It wants us to go down that path." "But why?" Sarah asked, horrified. "Why not just attack us at the camp? Why bring the frame? Why lure us with our own memories?" Liam stared at the frame. It was clean, unnaturally so, sitting on the dusty, rotting log. It wasn't dirty, as if it had been dug up or dropped. It was placed. "The old man said the forest gives the voices back," Liam murmured. "Maybe the voices are just a lure. Maybe the real power is the memory. The thing that took Mark, it's a collector. It doesn't just take the body. It takes the memory of the person, too. That frame, that private conversation, it's showing us that it absorbed him." Liam gripped the steering wheel, his mind racing through the few, vague bits of folklore he'd read. Creatures of the void, psychic predators, I can't get a signal here, Liam announced, abandoning the radio. The trees are too thick, even for the sat link. We need to drive back out to the main road. He put the car in gear. Just as he did, a new sound came from the path, the one beside the picture frame. It was Sarah's voice again, but this time, it was laced with agonizing grief and a plea for death. Liam, please. Just let it end. Please. I can't bear the thought of what it knows about us. It was a line from a terrible, confidential conversation Sarah had with Liam months ago, after a family tragedy. A moment of intense vulnerability and despair. Sarah's face went white. She wasn't just scared. She was wounded by the privacy of the moment being exposed. That's enough, Liam growled, slamming his fist on the dashboard. He couldn't handle the psychological attack any longer. It's attacking our history. It's trying to break us down. He drove again, faster this time. The trail twisted and turned, and the light was still only a murky gray. Then, they hit a section of the road that felt subtly wrong. The trees were different. They were older, thicker, their bark mossy and dark, forming a claustrophobic tunnel overhead. The ground beneath the tires felt suspiciously smooth, almost paved, though it was covered in earth and pine needles. Wait, Liam, pull over. Sarah yelled. The trees. The road. Liam slammed on the brakes. They looked back and forth. The road they were on now was too straight, too uniform. It was an old logging road, yes, but this section felt manicured. And then they saw it. A small, gray, lichen-covered concrete block set into the earth right next to the car door. It was an old mileage marker, but the lettering wasn't in miles. CAIRN. 500. Cairn. Liam muttered. What is a cairn? A stack of rocks. A burial marker. Sarah breathed, her voice barely audible. Or a landmark for something forgotten. And then they noticed the most terrifying detail about the road they were on. Littered sporadically on the ground, stretching ahead and behind for as far as they could see, were objects. Small, seemingly random objects. A child's plastic spinning top. A single, rusted key on a pink lanyard. A petrified dog chew toy. A faded postcard of a beach town hundreds of miles away. Each item was a personal relic, instantly recognizable as something valuable, lost, or intimately tied to a human memory. They weren't merely lost things. They were trophies. Liam felt a suffocating realization settle over him. They hadn't driven out of Blackwood Forest. They had driven deeper into its hunting ground. This was the Echo's nest. The place where it stored the memories and identities it had stolen. Liam knew they couldn't stay in the car. It was a metal cage, and the Echo was now surrounding them, playing its sickening game. We walk, Liam said, his voice flat. We walk until we find a clearing big enough for a signal, or until we reach the edge of this old road. He grabbed a multi-tool and their two largest knives from the car's emergency kit. Sarah took the sat radio and a flashlight. They started walking down the old road, away from the car, away from the camp, toward the marker that said Cairn, 500. As they walked, the density of the relics increased. They saw discarded eyeglasses, faded driver's licenses, and once, the remnants of a shredded, child-sized backpack. They tried to ignore the objects, focusing only on placing one foot in front of the other. Then, Liam stopped dead. Lying just off the path, nestled against the root of an ancient birch tree, was a familiar sight. It was a small, worn leather wallet. He recognized the specific, slightly frayed edge instantly. It was Mark's. Sarah gasped and ran to it, picking it up. It was empty save for a few crumpled bills and Mark's driver's license, the photo smiling back at them. As Sarah held the license, a clear, high-pitched scream echoed from the trees to their left. It was Sarah's voice, a scream of absolute, blinding, animalistic pain. The real Sarah dropped the wallet and threw her hands over her mouth, tears streaming again. It's tormenting us. It's using my sound against me. Don't listen. Liam shouted, grabbing her arm and forcing her to move. It's just sound. It's just air. The echo was furious now, its calm, psychological attack turning aggressive. The woods erupted with noise. They heard a symphony of horror. The sound of a heavy, rolling object hitting water. Splash, splash, splash. The repetitive, desperate clicking of a phone dialing 911, followed by a sudden, static choke. A woman's beautiful singing voice, high and operatic, suddenly cutting off with a sickening, wet thwack. And finally, a mixture of both Liam's and Sarah's voices, arguing bitterly, revealing old secrets, throwing accusations that had only ever been thought but never spoken. You never loved me, Liam's voice shrieked from the dark. You're pathetic, Liam. A coward. Sarah's voice hissed back. It was the sound of their relationship, their trust, and their shared history being torn to shreds by a psychic butcher. Liam kept his eyes fixed ahead, pulling Sarah along. It's trying to stop us. It can't hurt us if we don't stop moving. They reached another marker. Cairn, 200. The woods opened up suddenly into a large, unnaturally circular clearing. The air here was dry, cold, and smelled faintly of burnt ozone. In the center of the clearing stood the cairn. It wasn't a humble pile of rocks. It was a monstrous tower, perhaps 15 feet high, composed not of rough stones but of thousands of meticulously stacked, unnervingly smooth, black pebbles and small, water-polished stream rocks. It looked ancient and impossible, perfectly symmetrical, tapering to a sharp, unsettling point. The entire clearing was silent. The cacophony of voices had vanished. Around the base of the cairn, scattered like offerings, were hundreds of objects, more wallets, watches, car keys, half-filled journals, engagement rings, and small, faded photographs. Each one was a perfectly preserved piece of someone's life. And then, Liam saw Mark. He wasn't dead. Not exactly. Mark was leaning against the base of the cairn, his arms loosely wrapped around his knees, his eyes wide open. He was staring blankly at the sky. He was wearing his red fleece and his boots were on his feet. He looked physically unharmed, merely exhausted and vacant. Mark! Liam yelled, breaking free of Sarah and running toward him. Liam! No! It's a trick! Sarah screamed, but it was too late. Liam reached Mark and knelt down. Mark's eyes didn't track him. His skin was cold, his pulse was weak, but he was breathing. Mark! Talk to me. What happened? Are you okay? Liam grabbed his shoulders. Mark opened his mouth. And the sound that came out wasn't the high-pitched shriek of pain or the playful banter from earlier. It was a low, resonant, ancient sound. A thrum that vibrated deep in Liam's chest, like a massive bell being struck underwater. Then, Mark spoke, but the voice wasn't his. It was a composite. A deep, gravelly tone layered with Mark's higher register and laced with the familiar, metallic flatness of the recorded voice. He gave it willingly. The exchange was fair. I gave him the peace of forgetting, and I took what he was. I took the sound of his laughter, the weight of his fear, the memory of his mother's face. Mark's empty eyes rolled down to Liam. The voice spoke again, now sounding like a perfect, mocking mimicry of Liam's own voice. You were always the skeptic, Liam. The one who needed logic. I can give you logic. I can show you the pattern of your future, the quiet you will find when you stop fighting. Liam recoiled, scrambling backwards. This was not a beast. It was an intelligence, a collector of human experience, dwelling in the silence it created. You took him, Liam whispered, gripping his knife. The thing using Mark's mouth smiled, a terrifyingly unnatural movement of lips over teeth. I merely integrated him. He is now part of the deep quiet. Like the others. The thing nodded toward the cairn. Every stone is a memory. Every relic is a name. Every voice is a moment of life I have catalogued. I am the silence that remains. Liam glanced back at Sarah, who was standing at the edge of the clearing, tears streaming, clutching the satellite radio like a shield. It knows too much, Sarah whispered, her voice barely audible. It knows everything about us. Mark's mouth opened again, and this time, the voice was Sarah's, the actual voice she used right now, heavy with grief. Liam, I hate you for bringing me here. I wish I had never said yes to this trip. That's what you thought, didn't you? That's what you were thinking when the engine died. The psychic attack was brutal, targeting the small sliver of doubt Liam had harbored about the trip. Liam stood up, gripping the knife, his mind finally clearing into a singular, focused rage. You feed on doubt and memory, Liam spat out. You use our past to erase our present. The Mark thing tilted its head, its voice a low, resonant thrum. The human voice is a chaos of noise. I restore the silence. I refine the memory. Liam looked from the cairn to Mark's vacant face. Mark was gone. What remained was a mouthpiece for the echo. He shifted his gaze to Sarah. She was the only one left. The radio, Liam yelled, pointing at the cairn. If it collects sound, maybe it hates a signal. Get the radio working now. Sarah, spurred by a desperate flicker of hope, dropped to her knees and began frantically pulling out the antenna and twisting the dials. The echo reacted instantly. Mark's body stood up, arms dangling, and began to walk slowly toward Sarah. Stop, Sarah. Stop the noise. Stop fighting what is already accepted. The voice was now Liam's own, calm, reasonable, authoritative. It's pointless. Just let me have the relief. Liam lunged, his knife drawn. He didn't aim for Mark, but for the radio. He knew if he could disrupt the signal, he might buy Sarah time. As Mark's body moved closer to Sarah, a new sound came. A rhythmic, high-frequency click that seemed to originate from the cairn itself, growing louder with every step. Liam tackled Mark from the side, sending them both sprawling. The knife skittered away into the rocks. The Mark thing was incredibly strong, but lacked coordination. It was like wrestling a large, heavy doll. It didn't fight back with skill, only with raw, clumsy force, trying to pin Liam down. The Mark thing's mouth was close to Liam's ear. It didn't speak Liam's voice this time. It spoke his mother's voice, a soft, loving tone he hadn't heard in 20 years. My sweet boy, you tried so hard. Now rest. It's safe here. Let go of the fight, my love. Tears stung Liam's eyes, but he used the emotional pain as fuel. He twisted away, scrambling to his feet. He looked wildly around for the knife. Sarah was still fumbling with the radio, shaking her head, tears streaming. The cairn was clicking louder, faster, like a heart monitor spiraling out of control. Liam spotted the knife, plunged into the dirt near a cluster of the dark, smooth stones. He ran for it. Before he could reach it, the cairn erupted. Not with sound, but with pressure. A sudden, massive shift in the air, a vacuum of noise that slammed into them like a physical wall. The silence was so absolute it was deafening. Liam felt his inner ear swim, the pressure threatening to burst his eardrums. He stumbled, falling hard. The Mark thing was still moving toward Sarah. Sarah looked up, her face resolute, and then, she found it, the signal. The sat radio, in her hands, suddenly blared to life, not with a static crackle, but with the high, piercing, digitized scream of a high-power emergency beacon. The sound was designed to cut through interference, a single, pure, mechanical shriek of pure information. The echo recoiled. The marked thing stopped instantly, its arms frozen mid-reach. The cairn, the tower of memory, began to vibrate. The thousands of smooth black stones shuddered. The sound of the beacon was an agonizing counterpoint to the deep quiet. It was information without feeling, sound without memory, and the echo couldn't process it. Liam seized the opportunity. He lunged for his knife, snatched it up, and ran toward the cairn. He didn't know what would happen, but he knew the cairn was the center of the trap. He slammed the hilt of the heavy knife against the side of the stone tower with all his strength. The impact was muffled by the intense silence, but the vibration was profound. A small section of the stones dislodged and fell away. From the fissure, something pale and viscous oozed out, followed by a rush of air that smelled like dust and dried blood. Liam kept hitting it, slamming the hilt against the central structure. With the third hit, the entire cairn collapsed. It didn't fall silently. It exploded in a burst of sound. Hundreds of voices erupted simultaneously: shrieks, screams, whispers, laughs, prayers, and pleas. The compressed memories of every person the echo had absorbed were unleashed in one chaotic, overwhelming torrent. It was the sound of 1,000 lives ending, all at once. Liam and Sarah fell to the ground, hands over their ears, weeping under the auditory assault. The marked thing simply dropped. Mark's body lay limp on the ground, still and empty. The storm of sound lasted perhaps 30 seconds, and then, it vanished. Not slowly, but instantly, like a circuit breaker finally tripping. A new silence fell over the clearing. But this time, it was different. It was the silence of a forest after a storm, raw and empty, but no longer hostile. And then, a tiny, almost inaudible sound broke the void: a robin's chirp. Liam slowly lowered his hands. He looked at Sarah. She was pale, but whole. They crawled to Mark. Liam felt his neck. The pulse was still there, but impossibly faint. Mark was alive, but shattered. They didn't hesitate. Liam lifted Mark's heavy, inert body, slinging him over his shoulder. Sarah grabbed the sat radio. They began to walk, following the old road back. As they passed the car, Liam tossed the keys to Sarah. "Drive. Don't stop for anything." He got into the back seat, holding Mark's lifeless form. Sarah drove. She didn't look in the mirror. She didn't look at the road. She just kept the wheel straight and pressed the pedal to the floor, speeding down the trail, scattering the trophies of the deep quiet into the trees. The forest was no longer silent. They heard squirrels chattering, the buzz of insects, and the distant, normal cry of a crow. Blackwood Forest was now just a forest, exhausted and confused. They drove until the sun finally burst over the horizon, bathing the road in normal, healthy gold light. They reached the trailhead, the splintered cedar marker, and burst out onto the main gravel road. Liam pulled out his phone. 3 bars. He called 911. 2 weeks later, Liam sat in a sterile hospital waiting room, the relentless beep 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 of medical monitors a grating, welcome noise. Mark was in intensive care. Physically, he was fine, suffering only from extreme dehydration. Mentally, he was a blank slate. He could breathe, he could eat, but he couldn't speak, or process sound, or react to anything. He was silent, lost in a permanent, vegetative quiet. The doctors called it catatonic aphasia caused by severe psychological trauma. Sarah was sitting across from Liam. They hadn't slept well since returning. They had told the police they'd been separated. Mark got lost, and they found him in shock. They couldn't tell the truth. Who would believe a story about a cairn built of memory and a creature that spoke with their own voices? Sarah was still holding the small wooden picture frame. It was the only thing they had brought back, besides Mark's shell. I keep thinking about the laugh, Sarah whispered, finally breaking a long silence. The one it used to try and lure you away. Oh, that's so typical, Mark. You have to get a picture of that, right? That was a good memory, Liam. A really happy one. It weaponized the best of us, Liam said hollowly. That's what made it so effective. Why the frame, though? Sarah asked, rubbing the smooth, unfinished wood. Why bring a blank frame from your house? Liam looked at the frame. He had an awful, gut-wrenching feeling he knew the answer. It didn't bring the memory of my dog and me, Liam said slowly. It brought the container. The frame is the physical representation of the spot where a memory should be. And it left it blank because it knew that Mark was the next photo it was trying to collect. A trophy for the cairn. Sarah shuddered and placed the frame on the table, turning it face down. A nurse walked in and called Sarah's name. She was due for her daily psychological evaluation. Liam watched her go, then picked up the local newspaper left on the table. He flipped idly through the pages, until a small article in the back caught his eye. Missing hiker last seen near Blackwood Forest. The accompanying photograph was of a woman, smiling brightly. Her name was Jenna Kreska, 28. She had gone on a solo camping trip a week after they returned. Liam read the details. Jenna was an amateur ornithologist, reportedly trying to record the unique bird calls of the northern woods. A cold, clammy dread settled over Liam. The birds. The silence. He knew. The echo had been temporarily satiated, its physical structure, the cairn, destroyed. But the destruction hadn't killed it. It had merely forced it to scatter, to start over. It was rebuilding its cache, finding new vessels. Liam stood up, throwing the newspaper into the trash. As he walked toward the elevator, a sound stopped him. It wasn't loud. It was soft, high-pitched, and delicate. It was a robin's chirp. The same sound he'd heard in the clearing, the first sound of the returning world. He stopped and listened. Chirp, chirp, the sound came again, closer now. It seemed to come from the end of the hall, near Mark's room. Liam walked slowly towards the end of the corridor, his heart hammering a frantic rhythm against his ribs. He reached Mark's door and peered through the small window. Mark was lying on the bed, eyes vacant, staring at the ceiling. And then, Mark's mouth opened. It was the robin's chirp. Perfect, clear, and absolutely unnatural coming from a human throat. The eyes of the man who used to be Mark finally shifted, and they focused on Liam. The lips didn't move much, but the sound that followed was chilling. It wasn't a chirp. It was a single, clear, high-pitched word. It was Sarah's voice, full of relief and love. The sound she made when they were finally safe in the car. Home. Liam stood there, paralyzed, watching the empty shell of his friend, listening to the stolen sound of his love, and realized the chilling truth. The echo hadn't left Blackwood Forest. It had simply hitched a ride out, nestled deep within the quiet, vacant vessel of Mark, and it was still listening, still collecting, waiting for the perfect moment to speak again. He could only wonder what memories, what new, terrifying secrets, it had absorbed during the long, silent drive home. The silence was over. The echoes had begun. Thank you so much for watching this video. Make sure to subscribe, like, comment and turn on notifications if you enjoyed the video so you never miss an upload.